Hello everybody, welcome back to another video here on Atlas Image on YouTube. I am Alex Heitz, owner and operator of Atlas Image here in Grand Junction, Colorado, and I enjoy making different kinds of real estate photography related videos here on YouTube, the kinds of things that you might not normally see on YouTube. There's plenty of content covering the basics, intermediate stuff, even a little bit of advanced work as well. But I like to kind of operate in something of a different space, sort of try to do my own thing, forge my own path, learn from people who are have a lot of ingenuity and creativity, and prioritize efficiency when it comes to editing and shooting real estate. So this video, as you can see, is a very quick way to merge three brackets into an HDR image and get a pretty solid result out of it. Much better than you could get with an HDR merge in Photoshop. And it also just gives you more flexibility and control in the process as you go. So as you can see, this is the merged image that I created from those three brackets you saw in the intro. This is shot on my old GH4, so it's a little bit noisier. It's also a smaller resolution. As you can see, there's definitely some noise mixed in here that I probably could have managed better if I had upped the noise reduction. But overall, for an MLS image, pretty solid. So this process, I'm going to say, is good for images that don't have too much dynamic range between the brackets. And I'll show you what I mean by that once we get into Lightroom. Also, I'm going to very loosely and broadly go over what this action does. I'm not going to walk you through exactly how to create it for yourself. I will have it linked in the description if you would like to download it. It should work for pretty much any image that you have, doesn't matter the camera, any of that kind of stuff. Although you might need to make some tweaks here and there depending on if you have issues or not. So let's go on and hop on over to Lightroom and I'll show you how this thing works. I'm going to show you how this works with a handful of different examples. I have a lot of some old shots here from my old GH4, and then right around here, everything onward is from my GH6 that I'll show you. So yeah, this first example that you saw was 7 brackets. I shot this a while ago. This was a nice place. But as you can see, here are 7 brackets, dark to light, of this interior here. And we're only going to be using 3 images for this. So we have to pick and choose our brackets carefully. This action works best if they are 2 stops apart. So, you know, like a -2, 0, +2 situation, or +3, +1, -1, that sort of thing also can be applicable here. Because some of these images, like for example, this image here, the 3 brackets that I used were 3, 5, and 7. So I used my +3, my +1, and my -1 for this situation, just because of how the scene was structured here. And depending on how much you incorporate this action into your workflow, you might be wanting to ensure that you're taking enough brackets of the scenes that you're capturing. You want to kind of look at the scene and be like, okay, how far down do I need to go to get highlight information out the window? And then if I go 2 stops above that, is that a good base image for the midtones? And then 2 stops above that, is that good for my shadow detail? Those are the questions you need to be asking as you're shooting to ensure that you're getting the proper detail here. And if the image is just way too high dynamic range, really dark inside, really bright outside, this is probably going to give you a washed out result. So that's why I'm showing you a lot of these examples that are fairly straightforward in terms of how these brackets work here, because the ones that are too dark inside definitely are too dark outside as well. And then here, I got these backwards. So like this one, for example, this is my brightest exposure, and I'm just barely getting the shadow detail I need. It's obviously in the photo. If I up the shadows, it's all there. So like, okay, that works good. Let's go 2 stops down, 2 stops down. So you have, you know, a stop in between, basically, that you're not using. So it's like, okay, is this good for my base? Are my midtones there? That's not bad, and it's close to my highlights out the window. And then this one works just fine for the highlights out the window as well. Even if I lowered the highlights all the way, you can definitely see that it's all still out there. So yeah, let's go ahead and try it with this set of images here. We're going to do a little bit of prep work on these before we send them into smart object layers in Photoshop for the action. So first things first, you want to choose your most natural or flat camera profile. Very important. We want not contrasty images going into this thing. We want it all to be as flat and neutral as possible. And then after we do the merge and solidify it, then we can pull out the good detail in the image. So like I said, camera natural or camera flat is a great starting point. If you don't have that, or it just doesn't really seem to like look like it's flat enough, you can actually just lower the contrast a little bit too. So this is my camera natural on my GH4, and it's just not quite flat enough. So I'm going to try taking the contrast down to 25 in each of these. And I feel like that's giving me a better result than if I just had it like that. So bringing it down by 20 or 25 can be a good option too if your camera profile isn't flat enough. When I get to my GH6, it does have a camera flat that is way less contrasty, so I'll use that. But here I'm just, pushing that down by 20. I made a preset here that I will click and use here. And what this preset does is it comes down to the mixer and applies these things to the saturation: -10 orange, -25 yellow, -15 green, aqua, -25 blue, and then -15 purple and magenta. Those are just colors we don't really need in our interior, so I pull those out a little bit. If you want to, you can also go into luminance and up the luminance of orange and yellow. That'll give your midtones a nice color boost, or a boost in those colors. You don't have to. And then down in detail, sharpening, 40 to 50 is probably good, 30 to 50. My radius is 1.5, my masking is 30. Doing a masking of anywhere between 20 and around 40 is a good idea. So you're sharpening your edges and not the entire frame. And for noise reduction, I have this set to a 10. This is more for the work that I do on my GH6. So with this example here, since it's a bit noisier, I could up this to 15 and then apply some sharpening after the fact if I would like to. So I'll do that. And then it also enables remove chromatic aberrations and profile corrections here, and it adds a 3 or a 4 on the defringes. So that is all that this preset does. It doesn't do anything to the exposure or anything to the light section here. Doesn't do anything for texture or clarity. It just, enables, it gets the colors correct, and it gets some of the sharpening, noise reduction, and camera corrections correct. So that is really all that we have to do here. We could technically look at each one and see if they need adjusting even more. Because like maybe your bright exposure isn't bright enough and you want to push it up to make sure that it's getting that shadow detail. Possibly this one is just a little too bright or too dark. I would recommend leaving the base layer alone if you can. And then this one you could tweak a little bit as well. But I recommend trying not to do that as much as possible, because the action is going to run on the assumption that your exposures are pretty much 2 stops apart, give or take, without much difference in that light. So we have these 3 chosen here. I'm going to come in here and mess around with the white balance here, see what I get. That looks about right. Actually nailed that first try. That looks pretty good. Okay, so we'll go with that. Right click, edit in, open as smart object layers in Photoshop. Now, if that option is not there for you, it means you have not updated Lightroom Classic, and you will need to do that. You could do it without doing so, and you could just open them up as smart objects. And then you'd have to break out every window, hold shift, click and drag it in, and order the layers dark to light like this. But I would recommend just upgrading Lightroom and getting that fixed there. So, okay, this is where we start here. The action is pretty much ready to go out of the box with this order dark to light here and the dark one selected. So I'll just run through the action, show you what it does, and then we will break into it and I'll show you all the little components that are going on here. So Control F2 is my shortcut. This will run a few camera raw filters, and then it will select the base and it will tell me we need to adjust the exposure of this image so the midtones are well exposed. So we're not looking outside, we're not looking at the shadows. It's very tempting to look at the shadows here, but we're just kind of looking at the walls. We want the walls to look somewhat normal, not too bright like this, because then you're just pushing it into the shadow layer for no good reason. We want this to still maintain some detail out the window, while also just kind of brightening it up a little bit. So I'm feeling like a +5 here is probably pretty good. That looks like it's helping with the midtones in here. We hit OK, and it will finish blending for us. So this is the result here. We have a shadows group. This is controlling our shadows. And we have a highlights group that is controlling our highlight detail. Now from here, you can toy around with pushing the highlight layer up above. So as you can see, that kind of helps with like down near the bed there. It kind of helps with some of the detail down there. Pushing the highlights above the shadows group can sometimes wash out the image a little bit. But in this case, it really doesn't. So as you can see, you zoom in here and it just perfectly brings in that highlight detail much better. And then the shadows layer is usually pretty potent, pretty strong. So I recommend just grabbing the opacity, bringing it down, and pushing it up to where you need it. So maybe like 75. We don't want a finished image here. We want a very flat image. We want the brightness of the room to match the brightness outside reasonably well. Maybe to have the outside be a little bit brighter. But now that we have this image, we're going to go ahead and flatten it. I will open up Camera Raw Filter, and I have a preset, a full bump here. That just gets us in the ballpark of where we need. That's looking pretty solid. I don't know, maybe I'll add a bit extra contrast just for kicks and giggles, but that's looking nice. I can maybe push the whites up even more. Yeah, and then I'll push the base exposure down just a hair. There we go. All right, that's looking good. I'm going to open up my replace color here, and we're just going to desaturate a few of the gross looking colors that we don't want in the image. There we go. Okay, and then we could also, if we want, make a color layer, or we can do my replace color layer. We can pull down the saturation by like 40, and then I'll come in with a brush to reveal. We'll do a flow of maybe 5, and we'll just paint in where we want this color taken out. Bada bing, bada boom. Very subtle, but you know, it helps. It helps. I don't like white walls. I don't like gooey looking textures. Yeah, there we go. That's a bit more controlled. All right, flatten again. Anything else I want to do to this image? I could try my curves midtone boost, see if that just kind of helps with the interior here. Yeah, I think so. That looks nice. We'll just merge that down, apply a little bit of contrast. Does that help? Yeah, that's not bad. Now at this point, I know people don't like to add saturation to interiors, but after this process, it's common to lose maybe a bit of saturation. So you can toy with adding like 5 back in, just to make the colors a little bit richer. But there you go. That's like that. I feel like that's perfectly fine and acceptable to deliver to an MLS. Some of you might disagree with that. You might think you need that Vietnam secret sauce and over-edited look. In my humble opinion, I don't find that very attractive. I think this is perfectly acceptable. Control S, Control W, you open up Lightroom and it pops back in here. Hit P to pick it. And then you can just keep going with this process. At the very end, you search for what you have flagged, or just search for TIFFs. And then you'll have all your interiors there ready to go. And now that it's back in here, you can adjust it even further. You can come in and hit it with a vertical to fix the verticals as well. But any extra work you want to do to it in here before you export it can be done as well. So very quick process, very quick process. Let's run through another set here. And I'll show you exactly what's going on as well. So This one, let me make sure I have this organized properly. 18, 19, 20, 22. Oh, there we go. 21. Got imported in a weird order. So this is 7 brackets, as you can see. Let's go ahead and find a good exposure here to get some nice white balance. A little too blue, perhaps. It's at 3,700, 3,600, 3,800. 38's probably about right. Might up the tint just a little bit. Who cares, man? Who cares? A little bit more, 3,900. I've already delivered this photo quite a while ago. This house sold, so who cares? All right, so here we go. We need to choose our highlights layer, our base layer, and our shadow layer. So I'd recommend starting with the shadows. So like here, this brightest one looks pretty good. Let's grab our brackets here, see what we got. Base, okay. And highlights, fine. Yeah, that'll work. Looks good to me. So I'll hit it with my preset. I'll go with camera natural. I'll bring that contrast down by about 20 just to help out, make it flatter. There you go. Not bad. Not bad. That's the thing with the contrast, is that it doesn't, it can affect the saturation a little bit for sure. See that? Interesting stuff, huh? We can fix that later if need be. And that has all this stuff done to it. That's all good to go. Like I said, it's my older camera. I'll bump that up to 15. Yeah, that's all good. So now we bring it in as smart object layers in Photoshop. They load relatively quickly as well, which is nice. And the action runs pretty quickly too. So that's all very helpful stuff. Okay, so allow me to run through what is going on in these images here. So basically what's happening is the black, the highlights layer is having a camera filter applied to it. Now, what it is doing, whoops, I hit play, my bad. Double click, don't hit play. All right, so what is happening here is we are bringing up the exposure by 2¼ stops, okay, on the highlights layer. So this is before, obviously very dark. We bring up that exposure to make the midtones match closer to the base layer. But because we have all of that highlight information still in the file, we can drag this down and get perfectly acceptable views outside the window here. Blacks we can bring up to 100 as well, just to help with that interior. And the shadows obviously need brought up as well to get it closer to that base layer. So not really losing a whole lot of information out that window there. The reason I bring it up to 2.25 and not just 2 exactly, I did have it here for a while. I found that because you often have to increase the exposure of the base layer, that moves it further away from the highlights layer. And so I prefer to have the highlights layer get a little bit closer so that that blend happens much more naturally. So there's that. I had a bunch of dehaze to kind of help with the gradient blend that goes on, or the very feathered luminosity masking that happens. Clarity up 25, texture up 10. I like to increase my texture rather than decrease it. And then we have a little bit of a curves layer going on in here where I've set these to be exactly where they are on these intersections, and then the midtones just get that extra little boost. On 128 goes up to 136. And then for detail, I sharpen it and reduce the noise, because if you don't do this, then it just kind of looks a little soupy, and you want to make it a bit extra crispy so that it can blend a little bit easier. So that is what happens there on that layer. On the shadow layer, what happens is it this one, I believe? Yes, so the exposure is brought down a full stop. Shadows are brought all the way up to account for that, and blacks are brought all the way up. And this just gives you a very nice flat image for the shadows. And then with the curve, I go in and I bring the highlights and lights down by 15 and 10 in the what's called parametric curve. And that just kind of helps out with those brighter spots and just evens the image out a little bit better. So basically what is happening here, if I just run the action, I would walk you through all the things step by step, but they incorporate certain luminosity masking that you do in the channels here by like holding control RGB, and that selects a certain luminosity value, and then, you know, you feather that and invert it and all kinds of things. So you can look through this action to see what it's doing. But if I just go ahead and hit play here, what will have happened up to the point of this message is that I made that camera raw filter down here for the shadows and the one for the highlights, ordered them properly, put the base on the bottom, and then I ran a camera raw filter on this base that lowered the highlights by 50, upped them by 50, deleted it, and then ran it again with the message to up the exposure. And it will keep those highlights and shadows at minus 50 plus 50 because that was the last camera raw filter I ran. So rather than having to enter those in manually this time, I just had it run it like that once, delete it, run it again so those settings are still loaded here, and now I can play with the exposure. So when it comes to doing the exposure, try not to push it too much. If you're getting above 1.5, the blend starts to fall apart, so just be aware of that. Anywhere from like 0.2 to 1 is generally pretty safe. And you're just looking at the midtones. You're not looking at the shadows. We still have shadows down here. You're not really looking at the highlights, but you don't want to push the highlights too much because then you're really washing out that, that blend. So somewhere in the middle is good. Again, 0.5 is looking pretty nice. And we hit OK. Now, what happens from there is the shadows and highlights are masked out based upon what you did to this base image. So because we've gone from this to this, where we've fixed the midtones, now the highlights image has a mask over it based upon the luminosity of that base image that we just affected. Which is why you have to make that adjustment to get good midtones before you pull the highlights and shadows out of that luminosity. So this is the highlights. This image here, this mask, is feathered by about 8 pixels. And I'll zoom in here and I'll show you what this looks like if you don't feather it. So zoom out. So highlights, if you just don't feather it, it's kind of hard to see, but things just kind of look a little stale, and on certain high dynamic range images, it can look a little weird. The more you feather it, the more it just kind of like loses its, like you can even see over here, it's just kind of starting to lose that detail. So we don't want to push that too much. Anywhere between 4 and maybe 15 is good. Can even go up to 12. Just kind of toy with it, see how it looks. Generally, 8 is fine. And then same thing with the shadows, except this shadows mask is blurred or feathered by 200. You can go anywhere between like 1 and 400 on this, and it will still look fine. So there's 100, 200. The more you feather it, the more it just kind of spills over a lot of these areas. The less you feather it, it gets really kind of washed out. So yeah, anywhere between 1 and 200 I find is good. I just leave it at 200, and that's it. And then I have it apply. I put these in groups, and then I put a layer mask over them. So if there's like certain areas I wish to control, I can be like, okay, let's take a brush and make it black. And it's like, you know what? I don't really want the shadows down in here to show up. So I can just paint over this layer mask and just kind of control where the light goes. Same with the highlights. You can do the same thing there. So like here, I would put the highlights above. Yep, it's not washing anything out. You're just getting more detail that way. And we're looking good there. So that's essentially what it does, is it orders everything, puts those camera raw filters on the highlight and shadow layers to help with the blend. And then you adjust the base image, get the luminosity where you need it there, and then it will put luminosity masks on the shadow layer and the highlight layer that have been prepped beforehand and just help the whole image to blend together. So here with the shadows, again, bring it down, pull it back in until it looks kind of reasonable. Around 80% is probably good. Highlights layers looking just fine. So yeah, Control Alt Q is my hotkey to flatten the image. Control Shift A brings up camera raw filter, and this is where we will finish off the image. So I have two bumps here that I do. There's a pre-bump, which has all of the stuff that I'm going to do to the image anyway, which basically just includes a midtones curve here, like I showed before, and then adding texture, clarity, and dehaze to the image. Sometimes I want to kind of lower these maybe if I think the clarity is doing too much, making it a little too crunchy. And that's it. And then the rest you can you can hit auto, bring down the vibrance and saturation if you need to. Just kind of look and see where the image is at and adjust accordingly. So I have this full bump here, which is just a plus 32 exposure, a little bit of contrast, brings the highlights all the way down, shadows at 0, whites up 30, blacks down 10. And that's typically a good starting point. In this image, we got a lot of whites that are kind of being affected outside, so I don't want to push those too high. Same with blacks. Kind of have to toy with this image by image here. Okay, so that's reasonable. That's reasonable. I can also push up the shadows if need be, since this image kind of needs a little bit of help in terms of the dynamic range. Okay, that's fine. Maybe a 0.2. So yeah, there's that. And then I can go in and do my finishing touches. I have unsharp mask, 100% 1.5 radius tied to F9. Sharpens the image, looks decent. I have a replace color layer with a fuzziness of 120 set to it. So I can just go in and find areas that might need to be desaturated, minus 24. That makes a hidden layer right there that I can paint into. It's like, hey, I just want to get rid of that color right over here instead of the whole image. You can do that. Okay. Control E, flatten that. Let's try my midtones curves boost I have here, which is a very helpful little action I made. It has this curves layer set to, I'll basically just tell you what these are. It's around like 62 or 63. You lock that in at that spot. Then way up here, whatever that is, 180 something. I don't know. I just took 128, divided it by 2, and added and subtracted that to find out where the other spots are on the thing here. And then this middle part is 128 pushed up to 136 or 140, somewhere in there. So you're locking in the curve before the highlights and before the shadows. So you're just affecting the midtones. And then I have it set to luminosity mode, so that it's not affecting the saturation or the hue or anything like that. It's just the brightness. So as you can see, it just kind of brightens up the interior a little bit. That can be kind of helpful. And then I have a curves contrast action here. Do that, see what it does. Not bad. So yeah, I don't necessarily know if I'd call this a finished image. I'd probably play with it a little more to get it a little bit brighter inside, but decent starting point there. So yeah, let's do one more before we end the video. I'll show you this example here. This is a house that I shot recently. So the walls in this room, I'll just show you the ambient brackets here. The walls in this room, as you can see, are a very deep blue. It was really strange. If I white balance here, what does it look like? It's probably close to that. Maybe a 3000. Yeah, there you go. All right. So that's what we were looking at. And as you can see, dark, no windows, deep blue paint. I was shooting a majority of this house with flash, because I've been trying to practice just doing flash as a default and then doing HDR as the backup. So here's my ambient shot, and then I start trying flash shots, and I'm like, oh no, this is weird, man. Even if I like white balance for the toilet, it's like, it's so dark. It's just eating all of my light. And I'm trying to flash it so here I'm actually able to flash it off of, I don't know if you can see it, a notebook. And like that's better, but we're still, I don't know, it's just not looking quite right. It's weird. So I was like, you know what? I'll just shoot 5 brackets here and we'll go with that. So with this situation here, let me go ahead and hit that. Camera flat is good for this. Very nice flat profile on the GH6 that I shoot on. And yeah, that's plenty good. So the highlights are, you know, manageable here. The base is nice and flat already. Don't have to do much to it. And then we have a nice bright shadows layer. So we have all that set to go. Let's go and open it as smart object layers here. Bring this in. Nice, nice, nice. And with images like this, it goes fast and it's easy and the results are really strong. So if you're just shooting very basic HDR and not doing any flash for small rooms like this, this will do the job just fine. So Control F12, let's run through this. Bada bing, bada boom. Adjust the base image. We're already looking pretty good. I might just go like 20.25. Yeah, there we go. Looking nice. All right, and there's our blended image. Probably not a lot's going to change if I put the highlights up here. It's just the lights are a little bit more well managed. See, not a lot of highlights information going on here, and then the shadows are all in the recesses there. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that's fine. Flatten, Control Shift A. I'll just hit it with my full bump. See how that looks? Nice and bright, nice and clean. Could stand to use even more contrast, honestly. We're looking pretty solid. Whites are in control. Blacks, we can probably just add a bit more intrigue into the scene there. Highlights, yeah, those can be there. Yeah, I think that looks just about fine. Histogram's in a good spot. And there you go. Pretty much a finished image. A few touch-ups I might do here and there just to make it look a little bit better, but it's just a simple HDR merge. And I knew that this was going to be way easier in this situation than if I was messing around with Flash and trying to get that to work. Because like, even if I come in here and I'm looking at some of these where I'm like, okay, I'm sort of bouncing some Flash here. This is probably my brightest one. And it looks like most of our white balance is in that realm. So if I pick that one, then we come over here, probably like a +3 for the ambient. Okay, so if I try to go into Photoshop and blend these as Flash, I don't think the result's going to be that strong. I mean, I could have done Flash composites in here for sure, but like, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting, but the color's all strange. And like here, it's just way more even. You know, it has more of the interesting lighting, I guess, going on. But the color's just all washy and strange. And that's really hard to get around. So in situations like this, when you don't have a bunch of ambient to worry about, just shoot it HDR, man. Shoot it HDR. Anyway, I think that's about it. I know I kind of ran through that sort of quickly and didn't necessarily show you how it all worked. But it's a straightforward process, and I have all of the, you know, technical stuff in the actual action itself if you want to check that out. Here, let's just do one more for fun. I have one more in here. It's always the white balance, man. Always. Always. Can never get it just right, you know. Bunch of magenta showing up, man. What we got? What we got? What is the spectrum here? That's probably close. I'm going to say that's close. We'll go with that. Okay. So let me hit it with my preset. Camera flat. Yep. Very reasonable, very reasonable. Edit in, open smart object layers. So yeah, this workflow is very handy if you have images that aren't crazy high dynamic range, where it's super dark inside, super bright outside. You can get some solid images out of this that look perfectly acceptable for the MLS. So this has been, like I said, I've been trying to shoot as much flash as I can. But when I'm not shooting flash, this has been my go-to method. And if it's just way too high dynamic range and I can't shoot flash, I'll shoot an HDR merge and do some flash window pulls to just kind of make it a little bit better. So here, 0.5 is fine. Let's see what result we get. So yep, pretty flat, but the highlights are brought back in, which is nice. Yeah, we can move that up. No problem there. So shadow detail, not bad. It's still kind of dark, so I'm going to leave it like that. And then that's just affecting the lights in the exterior, so that's all fine. I probably could have brought it up maybe a bit more, but Control Shift A. Bada bing, bada boom, full bump. Full bump. So as you can see here, you're getting a little bit of that, like, what would you call that? Not ghosting, but like the flare around the edges, which is really the bane of HDR's existence, in my humble opinion, is the dealing with those. Because if you're not shooting flash, you're going to get those, because those are ambient artifacts that you're dealing with there. Let's see here. Can we bring up... Not a lot going on with whites inside the house. So I can maybe boost the interior a bit here. It's all about playing with how it all functions. All right, I'll go with that, and then I'll add my midtones boost. Yep, that helps. That helps. And then I have an action here, which I can go over this action in a separate video. But I have an action here for TV gradient fill, which is super handy. I come in here. Where is it? Right about there. Okay, I come in here. I Control Shift U to desaturate that spot. Control F5 makes my gradient fill. Thanks, Phil. Set to 80% opacity. I can kind of play with that, see how much I want more or less. That looks fine. I'll come in here on the background layer, and I'm just going to delete the reflection. It's a little annoying. Removing area. All right, looks good. Control E, merge it all down. Anything else I want to do? Control Shift R is my shortcut for replace color. Hit that up there. Oh, no, I don't know. I want, there we go, flatten it, flatten it. Control Shift R, bada bing. Fuzziness, well, about 120. Saturation -24. All right, there we go. Manages that a little bit. So yeah, I mean, like, you know, the possibilities are endless with this. You can adjust it to your heart's content. Play with the camera raw filter settings that occur within the action. I'm sorry that I don't really feel up to explaining the whole action and how it works bit by bit, but feel free to download it. It's in the description. And if you want to bring it into your actions under the actions category, hit this hamburger menu, hit load actions, and then you can go find the file, open it, and it will import it into the actions for you. And feel free to open it up, look through it. Has a bunch of, you know, complicated luminosity masking stuff occurring within it. So, yeah, if there are any other videos you guys would like to see from me, let me know. Always eager to learn more and share what I know with other people who are doing this, who are just seeking to streamline their workflow, make things a little bit easier, and just, you know, make their lives a little bit less of a headache without having to outsource their photos to Vietnam. So, that's all I got for you guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, Godspeed.